Hello, and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad. So, Episode 9, Book 9. Okay, well, when we last left our heroes on both sides, it seems as though the Trojans had gotten the favor of Zeus and were beating back the Greeks all the way back to their tall, hooked ships behind the palisade that they had crafted with a little trench and all that. So the Trojans are up, and they've lit many fires, and they're right outside the Greek camp. And so we're gonna go into where the Greeks are. Everybody's been drinking and being worried and stuff, and I think we'll pretty much get started right now. So I hope you have something nice to drink. This time I thought I'd tell you about the mugs I use, since I use everyone like a different one each time, pretty much. I think this one, as you can see, is the Great Seal of the Navajo Nation. So, have I been there? No, but my father apparently has, and he got me two mugs, one like this and one that's black instead of white. So, the Navajo being known as great warriors, cheers to them. To which this episode is dedicated, although not endorsed by. Okay, so let me just check the chat, see if everything's kind of working. We've had trouble before. Oh my goodness, looks no sound. Hang on. No sound. Did Oh, okay. Sound is good now, and I guess the music was muted. I wonder why that is. Sorry about that, everyone. But am I too quiet, do you think? Am I too quiet at the moment? Says you're kind of quiet. Alright, well, let me just up the sound just a little bit here. I had to readjust my mic because someone was borrowing it. So let me just bump it up to... not that far. Okay. Alright, this should do it for the sound. Alright, very good. Alright, sorry about that technical difficulty. It's live. Whatever. Okay, so Iliad, Book 9, Episode 9. So the Trojans kept watch, but panic, fear's sister, had wrapped her icy fingers around the Greeks, and all their best were stricken with unendurable grief. When two winds rise on the swarming deep, Boreas and Zephyr, blowing from Thrace in a sudden squall, the startling black waves will crest and tangle the surf with seaweed. The Greeks felt like that, pummeled and torn. Agamemnon's heart was bruised with pain as he went around to the clear-toned criers, ordering them to call each man to assembly, but not to shout. He pitched in himself. It was a dispirited assembly. Agamemnon stood up, weeping, his face like a sheer cliff with dark spring water washing down the stone. Groaning heavily, he addressed the troops. "Friends, Argive commanders and counselors, great Zeus, son of Cronus, is a hard god, friends. He kept me in the dark, after all his promises, all his nods my way, that I'd raise Ilion's walls before sailing home. It was all a lie, and I see now that his orders are for me to return to Argos in disgrace, and this after all the armies I've destroyed. I have no doubt that this is the high will of the god who has toppled so many cities and will in the future. All glory to his power. So this is my command for the entire army. Clear out with our ships and head for home. There's no hope. We will take Troy's tall town." He spoke, and they were all stunned to silence. The silence of an army too grieved to speak. Until at last Diomedes' voice boomed out. I'm going to oppose you if you talk foolishness, as is my right in assembly, laird. Keep your temper. First of all, you insulted me, saying in public I was unwarlike and weak. Every Greek here, young and old alike, knows all about this. The son of crooked Kronos split the difference when he gave you gifts. He gave you a scepter and honor with it, but he didn't give you strength to stand in battle, which is real power. Are you out of your mind? Do you really think the sons of the Achaeans are unwarlike and weak? If you yourself are anxious to go home, then go. You know the way. Your ships are here right by the sea, and a whole fleet will follow you back to Mycenae. But many a long-haired Achaean will stay too, until we conquer Troy. And if they don't, well, let them all sail back to their own native land. The two of us, Sthenelus and I, will fight on until we take Iliad. We came here with Zeus. He spoke, and all the Greeks cheered the speech of Diomedes, breaker of horses. Then up stood Nestor, the old charioteer. Son of Tydeus, you are our mainstay in battle, and the best of your age in council as well. No Greek will find fault with your speech, or contradict it, but it is not the whole story. You are still young. You might be my son, my youngest, yet you have given prudent advice to the Argive kings, since you have spoken aright. But I, who am privileged to be your senior, will speak to all points, nor will anyone scorn my words, not even King Agamemnon. Only outlaws and exiles favor civil strife. For the present, however, let us yield tonight and have our dinner. Guards should be posted outside the wall along the trench. I leave you this assignment to the younger men. But you, son of Atreus, take charge. You are king. Serve the elders a feast. It is not unseemly. Your huts are filled with wine, which our ships transport daily over the sea from Thrace. You have the means to entertain us and the men. Then choose the best counsel your assembled guests can offer. The Achaeans are in great need of good counsel. The enemy's campfires are close to our ships. Can this gladden any heart? This night will either destroy the army or save it. They all heard him out and did as he said. The guard details got their gear and filed out on the double under their commanders, Thrasymedes, Nestor's son, Ascalaphus, and Ialmenus, sons of Ares, Meriones, Apharius, and Dephirius, and Creon, the sons of Lycomedes. Each of these 7 had 100 men under his command, spears in hand. They took up their positions in a long line between the wall and the trench, where they lit fires and prepared their supper. Agamemnon, meanwhile, gathered the elders into his hut and served them a hearty meal. They helped themselves to the dishes before them, and when they had got enough food and drink, the first to spin out his plan for them was Nestor, whose advice had always seemed best before, and who spoke with their best interests at heart. Son of Atreus, most glorious lord, I begin and end with you, since you are the king of a great people, with authority to rule and the right of judgment from Zeus. It is yours to speak as well as to listen, and to stand behind others whenever they speak to our good. The final word is yours. But I will speak as seems best to me. No one will have a better idea than I have now, nor has anyone ever, from the time, divine prince, you wrested away the girl Briseis from Achilles' shelter, defying his anger and my opposition. I tried to dissuade you, but you gave in to your pride and dishonored a great man whom the immortals esteem. You took his prize and keep it still? But it is not too late. Even now we must think of how to win him back, with appeasing gifts and soothing words. And the warlord Agamemnon responded, Yes, old man, you were right on the mark when you said I was mad. I will not deny it. Zeus's favor multiplies a man's worth, as it has here, and the army has suffered for it. But since I did succumb to a fit of madness, I want to make substantial amends. I hereby announce my reparations. 7 unfired tripods, 10 gold bars, 20 burnished cauldrons, 12 horses, solid prize-winning race-horses who have won me a small fortune, and 7 women who do impeccable work, surpassingly beautiful women from Lesbos, I chose for myself when Achilles captured the town, and with them will be the woman I took, Briseis, daughter, and I will solemnly swear I never went to her bed and lay with her, or did what is natural between women and men. All this he may have at once, and if it happens that the gods allow us to sack Priam's city, he may, when the Greeks are dividing the spoils, load a ship to the brim with gold and bronze, and choose for himself the 20 Trojan women who are next in beauty to Argive Helen. And if we return to the rich land of Argos, he will marry my daughter, and I will honor him, as I do Orestes, who is being reared in luxury. I have 3 daughters in my fortress palace, Chrysothemis, Laodice, and Iphianassa. He may lead whichever he likes as his bride back to Peleus' house without paying anything, and I will give her a dowry richer than any a father has ever given his daughter. And I will give him 7 populous cities, Catamile, Enelope, grassy Hyde, sacred Phyre, Anthea, and with its meadowlands, beautiful Appia, and Pedasus, wine country. They are all near to the sea, on sandy Pylos' frontier, and cattlemen live there, rich in herds and flocks, who will pay him tribute as if he were a god, and fulfill the shining decrees of his scepter. I will do all this if he will give up his grudge. And he should. Only Hades cannot be appeased, which is why, of all gods, mortals hate him most. And he should submit to me, inasmuch as I am more of a king, and can claim to be elder. And then spoke Nestor, the Gerenian writer. Son of Atreus, most glorious Agamemnon, your gifts for Achilles are beyond reproach. But come, we must dispatch envoys as soon as possible to Achilles' tent, and I see before me who should volunteer. Phoenix, dear to Zeus, should lead the way, followed by Ajax and brilliant Odysseus. Odius and Eurybates can attend them as heralds. Now bring water for our hands and observe silence, that we may beseech Zeus to have mercy on us. Nestor spoke, and his speech pleased them all. Heralds poured water over their hands, and then youths filled bowls to the brim with drink and served it all around, first tipping the cups. Having made their libations and drunk their fill, they went out in a body from Agamemnon's hut. Gerenian Nestor filled their ears with advice, glancing at each, but especially at Odysseus, on how to persuade Peleus' peerless son. They went in tandem along the seething shore, praying over and over to the god in the surf for an easy time in convincing Achilles. They came to the Myrmidons' ships and huts, and found him, plucking clear notes on a lyre, a beautiful instrument with a silver bridge he had taken when he ransacked Aeacian's town, accompanying himself as he sang the glories of heroes in war. He was alone with Patroclus, who sat in silence, waiting for him to finish. His visitors came forward, Odysseus first, and stood before him. Surprised, Achilles rose from his chair, still holding his lyre. Patroclus, when he saw them, also rose, and Achilles, swift and sure, received them. "Welcome. Things must be bad to bring you here. The Greeks I love best, even in my rage." With these words Achilles led them in, and had them sit on couches and rugs dyed purple. And he called to Patroclus, "A larger bowl, son of Menoetius, and stronger wine, and cups all around. My dearest friends are beneath my roof." Patroclus obliged his beloved companion. Then he cast a carving block down in the firelight, and set on it a sheep's back and a goat's, and a hog chine too, marbled with fat. Automedon held the meat while Achilles carved it carefully and spitted the pieces. Patroclus, godlike in the fire's glare, fed the blaze. When the flames died down, he laid the spits over the scattered embers, resting them on stones, and sprinkled the morsels with holy salt. When the meat was roasted, he laid it on platters and set out bread in exquisite baskets. Achilles served the meat, then sat down by the wall opposite Odysseus and asked Patroclus to offer sacrifice. After he threw the offerings in the fire, they helped themselves to the meal before them, and when they had enough food and drink, Ajax nodded to Phoenix. Odysseus saw this, and filling a cup, he lifted it to Achilles. "To your health, Achilles, for a generous feast. There is no shortage in Agamemnon's hut now, here in yours, of satisfying food. But the pleasure of the table are not on our minds. We fear the worst. It is doubtful that we can save the ships without your strength. The Trojans and their allies are encamped close to the wall that surround our black ships, and are betting that we can't keep them from breaking through. They may be right. Zeus has been encouraging them with signs, lightning on the right. Hector trusts this, and his own strength, and has been raging recklessly like a man possessed. He is praying for dawn to come early so he can fulfill his threat to lop the horns from the ship's sterns, burn the hulls to ash, and slaughter the Achaeans dazed in the smoke. This is my great fear, that the gods make good Hector's threats, dooming us to die in Troy, far from the fields of home. Up with you, then, if you intend at all, even at this late hour, to save our army from these howling Trojans. Think of yourself, of the regret you will feel for harm that will prove irreparable. This is the last chance to save your countrymen. Is it not true, my friend, that your father Peleus told you as he sent you off with Agamemnon, 'My son, as for strength, Hera and Athena will bless you if they wish, but it is up to you to control your proud spirit. A friendly heart is far better. Steer clear of scheming strife, so that Greeks, young and old, will honor you.' You have forgotten what the old man said, but you can still let go of your anger right now. Agamemnon is offering you worthy gifts if you will give up your grudge. Hear me while I list the gifts he proposed in his hut. 7 unfired tripods, 10 gold bars, 20 burnished cauldrons, a dozen horses, solid prize when in racehorses, who have won him a small fortune, and 7 women who do impeccable work, surpassingly beautiful women from Lesbos, who chose for himself when you captured the town, and with them will be the woman he took from you, Briseis' daughter, and he will solemnly swear he never went to her bed and lay with her, or did what is natural between women and men. All this you may have at once, and if it happens that the gods allow us to sack Priam's city, you may, when the Greeks are dividing the spoils, load a ship to the brim with gold and bronze, and choose yourself the 20 Trojan women who are next in beauty to Argive Helen. And if we return to the rich land of Argos, you would marry his daughter, and he would honor you as he does Orestes, who is being reared in luxury. He has 3 daughters in his fortress palace, Chrysothemis, Laodice, and Iphianassa. You may lead whoever you like as your bride back to Peleus' house without paying anything. And he would give her a dowry richer than any father has ever given his daughter. and he will give you 7 populous cities: Cardamile, Anope, Grassy Hyde, Sacred Fury, Anthea with its meadowlands, beautiful Apia, and Pedasus, wine country. They are all near the sea, on sandy Peleus' frontier, and cattlemen live there, rich in herds and flocks, who will pay you tribute as if you were a god, and fulfill the shining decrees of your scepter. All this we will do if you give up your grudge. But if Agamemnon is too hateful to you, himself and his gifts, think of all the others suffering up and down the line, and of the glory you will win from them. They will honor you like a god. And don't forget Hector. You just might get him now. He's coming in close, deluded into thinking that he has no match in the Greek army that has landed on his beach. And Achilles, strong, swift, and godlike, son of Laertes, in the line of Zeus, Odysseus, the strategist, I can see that I have no choice but to speak my mind and tell you exactly how things are going to be. Either that or sit through the endless sessions of people whining at me. I hate like hell the man who says one thing and thinks another. So this is how I see it. I cannot imagine Agamemnon or any other Greek persuading me not after the thanks I got for fighting this war, going up against the enemy day after day. It doesn't matter if you stay in camp or fight. In the end, everybody comes out the same. Coward and hero get the same reward. You die whether you slack off or work. And what do I have for all my suffering? Constantly putting my life on the line. Like a bird who feeds her chicks whatever she finds and goes without herself. That's what I've been like, lying awake through sleepless nights, in battle for days, soaked in blood, fighting men for their wives. I've raided 12 cities with our ships and 11 on foot in the fertile Troad, looted them all, brought back heirlooms by the ton, and handed it all over to Atreus' son, who hung back in camp, raking it in and distributing damn little. But the others did get what the others did get, they at least got to keep. They all have their prizes, everyone but me. I'm the only Greek from whom he took something back. He should be happy with the women he has. Why do the Greeks have to fight the Trojans? Why did Agamemnon lead the army to Troy, if not for the sake of fair-haired Helen? Do you have to be descended from Atreus to love your mate? Every decent, sane man loves his woman and cares for her, as I did, loved her from my heart. It doesn't matter that I won her with my spear. He took her right out of my hands, cheated me, and now he thinks he's going to win me back? He can forget it. I know how things stand. It's up to you, Odysseus, and the other kings to find a way to keep the fire from the ships. He's been pretty busy without me, hasn't he? Building a wall, digging a moat around it, pounding in stakes for a palisade. None of that stuff will hold Hector back. When I used to fight for the Greeks, Hector wouldn't come out farther from his wall than the great oak tree by the western gate. He waited for me there once and barely escaped. Now that I don't want to fight him anymore, I will sacrifice to Zeus and all gods tomorrow, load my ship, and launch them on the sea. Take a look if you want, if you give a damn, and you'll see my fleet on the Hellespont in the early light, my men rowing hard. With good weather from the sea god, I'll reach Thea after a 3-day sail. I left a lot behind when I hauled myself here, and I'll bring back more gold and bronze, silken-waisted women, gray iron, everything except the prize of honor the warlord Agamemnon gave me and in his insulting arrogance took back. So report back to him everything I say, and report it publicly. Get the Greeks angry, in case the shameless bastard still thinks he can steal us blind. He doesn't dare show his dog face here. Fine. I don't want to have anything to do with him either. He cheated me, wronged me. Never again. He's had it. He can go to hell in peace. The half-wit that Zeus has made him. His gifts mean nothing to me. Not even if he offered me 10 or 20 times his present gross worth and added to it all the trade a communist does in a year, all the wealth laid up in Egyptian Thebes, the wealthiest city in all the world, where they drive 200 teams of horses out through each of its 100 gates. Not even if Agamemnon gave me gifts as numberless as grains of sand or dust would he persuade me or touch my heart, not until he's paid in full for all my grief. His daughter? I would not marry the daughter of Agamemnon, son of Atreus, if she were as lovely as golden Aphrodite. I could weave like owl-eyed Athena. Let him choose some other Achaean, more to his lordly taste. If the gods preserve me and I get home safe, Peleus will find me a wife himself. There are many Greek girls in Hellas and Thea, daughters of chieftains who rule the cities. I can have my pick of any of them. I've always wanted to take a wife there. A woman to have and to hold. Someone with whom I can enjoy all the goods old Peleus has won. Nothing is worth my life. Not all the riches they say Troy held before the Greeks came. Not all the wealth in Phoebus Apollo's marble shrine up in craggy Pytho. Cattle and flocks are there for the taking. You can always get tripods and chestnut horses. But a man's life cannot be won back. Once his breath has passed beyond his clenched teeth. My mother Thetis, a moving silver grace, tells me 2 fates sweep me on to my death. If I stay here and fight, I'll never return home, but my glory will be undying forever. If I return home to my dear fatherland, my glory is lost, but my life will be long, and death that ends all will not catch me soon. As for the rest of you, I would advise you too to sail back home, since there's no chance now of storming Ilion's height. Zeus has stretched his hand above her, making her people bold. What's left for you now is to go back to the council and announce my message. It's up to them to come up with another plan to save the ships and the army with them, since this one, based on appeasing my anger, won't work. Phoenix can spend the night here. Tomorrow he sails with me on our voyage home, if he wants to, that is. I won't force him to come. He spoke, and they were hushed in silence. Shocked by his speech and his stark refusal, finally, the old horseman, Phoenix, spoke. Bursting into tears, he felt the ships were lost. If you have set your mind on going home, Achilles, and will do nothing to save the ships from being burnt, if your heart is that angry, how could I stay here without you, my boy, all by myself? Peleus sent me with you on that day you left Thea to go to Agamemnon, a child still, knowing nothing of warfare or assemblies where men distinguish themselves. He sent me to you to teach you this. to be a speaker of words and a doer of deeds. I could not bear to be left behind now apart from you, child, not even if a god promised to smooth my wrinkles and make me as young and strong as I was when I first left the land of Hellas and its beautiful women. I was running away from a quarrel with Agamemnon, my father, who was angry with me over his concubine, a fair-haired woman whom he loved as much as he scorned his wife, my mother. She implored me constantly to make love to his concubine so that this woman would learn to hate the old man. I did as she asked. My father found out and cursed me roundly, calling on the Furies to ensure that never would a child of mine sit on his knees. The gods answered his prayers, underworld Zeus and dread Persephone. I decided to kill him with a sharp sword, but some god calmed me down, putting it in my mind what people would say, the names they would call me, so that, in fact, I would not be known as a parricide. From then on, I could not bear to linger in my father's house, although my friends and my family tried to get me to stay, entreating me, slaughtering sheep and cattle, roasting whole pigs on a spit, and drinking jar after jar of the old man's wine. For 9 solid days they kept watch on me, working in shifts, staying up all night. The fires stayed lit, one under the portico of the main courtyard, one on the porch in front of my bedroom door. On the 10th night, when it got dark, I broke through the latches and vaulted over the courtyard fence, eluding the watchmen and servant women. I was on the run through wide Hellas, and made it to Thea's black soil, her flocks, and to Lord Peleus, who welcomed me kindly and loved me as a father loves his only son, a grown son who will inherit great wealth. He made me rich and settled me on the border, where I lived as a king of the Dolopians. I made you what you are, my godlike Achilles, and loved you from my heart. You wouldn't eat, whether it was at a feast or a meal in the house, unless I set you on my lap and cut your food up, and fed it to you and held the wine to your lips. Many a time you wet the tunic on my chest, burping up wine when you were colicky. I went through a lot for you, because I knew the gods would never let me have a child of my own. No, I tried to make you my child, Achilles, so you would have to save me from ruin. But you have to master your proud spirit. It's not right for you to have a pitiless heart. Even the gods can bend, superior as they are in honor, power, and every excellence. They can be turned aside from wrath when humans who have transgressed supplicate them with incense and prayers, with libations and savor of sacrifice. Yes, for prayers are daughters of great Zeus, lame and wrinkled and with eyes averted. They are careful to follow in folly's footsteps. But folly is strong and fleet and outruns them all, beating them everywhere and plaguing humans who are cured by the prayers when they come behind. Revere the daughters of Zeus when they come, and they will bless you and hear your cry. Reject them and refuse them stubbornly, and they will ask Zeus, Cronos' son, to have folly plague you so he will pay in pain. No, Achilles, grant these daughters of Zeus the respect that bends all upright men's minds. If the son of Atreus were not offering gifts and promising more, if he were still raging mad, I would not ask you to shrug off your grudge and help the Greeks, no matter how sore their need. But he is offering gifts and promising more. And he has sent you a delegation of the best men in the army, your dearest friends. Don't scorn their words or their mission here. No one could blame you for being angry before. We all know stories about heroes of old, how they were furiously angry, but later on were won over with gifts or appeased with words. I remember a very old story like this, and since we are all friends here, I will tell it to you now. The Curetes were fighting the Aetolians in a bloody war around Calydon town. The Aetolians were defending their city, and the Curiates meant to burn it down. This was all because gold-throned Artemis had cursed the Curiates, angry at Oeneus, who had not offered her his orchard's first fruits. The other gods feasted on bulls by the hundred, but Oeneus forgot, somehow or other, only the sacrifice to great Zeus's daughter. So the archer goddess, angry at heart, roused a savage boar with gleaming white tusks and sent him to destroy Oeneus' orchard. The boar did a good job uprooting the trees and littering the ground with apples and blossoms, but Oeneus' son, Meleager, killed it. After getting up a party of hunters and hounds from many towns, it took more than a few men to kill this huge boar, and not before it had set many a hunter on the funeral pyre. But the goddess caused a bitter argument about the boar's head and shaggy hide between the Curiates and Aetolians. They went to war. While Meleager still fought, the Curiates had the worst of it, and could not remain outside Calydon's wall. But when wrath swelled Meleager's heart, as it swells even the hearts of the wise, and his anger rose against Althea, his mother, he lay in bed with his wife, Cleopatra, child of Murpassa, and the warrior Idas. Idas once took up his bow against Apollo to win Lysome, Marpessa. Her parents called the girl Halcyon, back then because her mother wept like Halcyon, the bird of sorrows, because the archer god Phoebus Apollo had stolen her daughter. Meleager nursed his anger at Cleopatra's side, furious because his mother had cursed him to the gods for murdering his uncle, her brother, that is, and she beat the earth, the nurturing earth, with her hands, and called upon Hades and Persephone the dread, as she knelt and wet her bosom with tears, to bring death to her son. And the Fury who walks in darkness heard her from the pit of Erebus, and her heart was iron. Soon the enemy was heard at the walls again, battering the gates. The Aetolian elders sent the city's high priest to pray to Meleager to come out and defend them, offering him 50 acres of Calydon's richest land wherever he chose, half in vineyard, half in clear plowland to be cut from the plain. And the old horseman, Oeneus, shook his doors, standing on the threshold of his gabled room, and recited a litany of prayers to his son, as did his sisters and his queenly mother. He refused them all, and refused his friends, his very best friends and boon companions. No one could move his heart or persuade him, until the Curiates, having scaled the walls, were burning the city and beating down his bedroom door. Then his wife wailed and listed for him all the woes that befall a captured people, the men killed, the town itself burnt, the women and children led into slavery. This roused his spirit. He clapped on armor and went out to fight, and so he saved the Aetolians from doom of his own accord, and they paid him none of those lovely gifts, savior or not. Don't be like that. Don't think that way, and don't let your spirit turn that way. The ships will be harder to save when they're burning. Come while there are gifts, while the Achaeans will still honor you as if you were a god. But if you go into battle without any gifts, your honor will be less, save us or not. And strong, swift-footed Achilles answered, I don't need that kind of honor, Phoenix. My honor comes from Zeus, and I will have it among these beaked ships as long as my breath still remains and my knees still move. Now listen to this. You're listening? Good. Don't try to confuse me with your pleading on Agamemnon's behalf. If you're his friend, you're no longer mine, although I love you. Hate him because I hate him. It's as simple as that. You're like a second father to me. Stay here. Be king with me and share half the honor. These others can take my message. Lie down and spend the night on a soft couch, At daybreak we will decide whether to set sail or stay." And he made a silent nod to Patroclus to spread a thick bed for Phoenix. It was time for the others to think about leaving. Big Ajax, Telamon's godlike son, said as much. "Son of Laertes in the line of Zeus, resourceful Odysseus, it's time we go. I do not think we will accomplish what we were sent here to do. Our job now is to report this news quickly, bad as it is. They will be waiting to hear. Achilles has made his great heart savage. He is a cruel man and has no regard for the love that his friends honored him with beyond anyone else who camps with the ships. Pitiless. A man accepts compensation for a murdered brother, a dead son. The killer goes on living in the same town after paying blood money, and the bereaved restrains his proud spirit and broken heart because he has received payment. But you, the gods have replaced your heart with flint and malice because of one girl, one single girl, while we are offering you 7 of the finest women to be found and many other gifts. Show some generosity and some respect. We have some under our roof. We have come under your roof, we few, out of the entire army, trying hard to be the friends you care for most of all." And Achilles, the great runner, answered him, "Ajax, son of Telamon in the line of Zeus, everything you say is after my own heart. But I swell with rage when I think of how the son of Atreus treated me like dirt in public as if I were some worthless tramp. Now go and take back this message. I won't lift a finger in this bloody war until Priam's illustrious son Hector comes to the Myrmidon ships and huts, killing Greeks as he goes and torching the fleet. But when he comes to my hut and my black ship, I think Hector will stop, for all his battle lust." He spoke. They poured their libations and headed for the ships, Odysseus leading. Patroclus ordered a bed made ready for Phoenix, and the old man lay down on fleeces and rugs covered with linen and waited for bright dawn. Achilles slept in an inner alcove, and by his side lay a woman he had brought from Lesbos with high, lovely cheekbones, Diomede, her name, Phorbas' daughter. Patroclus lay down in the opposite corner, and with him lay Iphis, a silken girl Achilles had given him when he took steep Scyrus, Aeneas' city. By now, Odysseus and Ajax were in Agamemnon's quarters, surrounded by officers drinking their health from gold cups and shouting questions. Agamemnon, the warlord, had priority. "Odysseus, pride of the Achaeans, tell me, is he willing to repel the enemy fire and save the ships, or does he refuse, his great heart still in the grip of wrath?" Odysseus, who endured all, answered, "Son of Atreus, most glorious Agamemnon, far from quenching his wrath, Achilles is filled with even more. He spurns you and your gifts and suggests that you think of a way to save the ships and the army. He himself threatens at dawn's first light to get his own ships onto the water, and he said he would advise the others as well to sail for home, since there is no chance now you will storm Ilion's height. Zeus has stretched his hand above her, making her people bold. This is what he said, and as these men here, who will come with me, will tell you, Ajax and the 2 heralds, prudent men both. Phoenix will spend the night there. Tomorrow he sails with Achilles on his voyage home. If he wants to, he will not be forced to go." They were stunned by the force of his words and fell silent for a long time, hushed in grief. Until at last, Diomedes said in his booming voice, Son of Atreus, glorious Agamemnon, you should never have pleaded with him or offered all those gifts. Achilles was arrogant enough without your help. Let him do what he wants, stay here or get the hell out. He'll fight later, all right. when he is ready, or a god tells him to. Now, I want everyone to do as I say. Enjoy some food, some wine, to keep up your strength, and then get some sleep. When the rosy light first streaks the sky, get your troops and horses in formation before the ships. Fight in the front yourselves." The warlords assented, taken aback by the authority of Diomedes' speech. Each man poured libation and went to his hut, where he lay down and took the gift of sleep. And that was Book 9 of Homer's Iliad. Wow! Finally, we got Achilles back in there. How about that? And boy, yeah, we sure made up for lost time with that speech. I find this particular book very interesting with the characters. Just because the main thing is obviously how Achilles feels in this time. But we'll get to him in a second. Leading up to that, we've got Agamemnon sort of repeats a speech that he did earlier on. Remember, I think it was in book 2, Agamemnon wanted to fight the Trojans after Achilles had said he wasn't going to fight anymore. And so he gave this fake speech saying, "Oh, Zeus doesn't want us to fight anymore, everybody let's go," to kind of trick the Greeks into thinking that they were going to go home to get their fighting spirit back up again. He says the same thing here with "Friends, Argive commanders and counselors, great Zeus, son of Cronus, is a hard god, friends. He kept me in the dark, yada yada." That whole thing is exactly the same as before, but this time he's sincere about it, all right? So it's kind of an interesting bit of repetition there. Obviously, with the oral tradition, it would probably be easier to memorize, but when you think about how long this thing is, like, are we really cutting corners? I don't know. It seems like there's not as much repetition as there would be. Although for this translation, some of the repetition, not like large paragraphs, but like some of the names of people is adjusted a bit. Like you notice how it says, you know, godlike Achilles or swift Achilles and all that. There's every person's name has like a special tag on it. It's because in Greek, when you're reading that aloud, it has a musicality to it, and it helps keep a rhythm with all the names. It's sort of like, I guess, a fill in a drums, like in a drum set or something like that. But anyway, let's see. So we got that. Now we mention Agamemnon mentions a character in here who I haven't talked about before, where he mentions Orestes when he's talking about how he will honor Achilles with gifts beyond compare. And you notice that the way I read it anyway was that he kind of like goes almost quiet a little bit when he's talking about his daughters. Well, Orestes is his oldest son, who is being reared in luxury. He mentions 3 daughters, but as we know, Agamemnon had a 4th daughter, or a first daughter rather, his eldest daughter, who was sacrificed to Artemis so that they could cross the sea, because he accidentally killed her sacred deer, and Artemis was very upset by that. Now, part of the interesting nuance to this story here is that when he's talking about Achilles taking one of his daughters as a bride, and he's mentioning all his other daughters and stuff, the way that, this is really messed up, the way that Agamemnon tricked his daughter and wife into coming to where they were for the sacrifice, but was by telling her that she was going to be marrying Achilles. So she thought she was going to get married, and her mom came with her, and Agamemnon was like, "Hey, you can go back," and she's like, "No, I want to see my daughter get married." But then they meet Achilles, and Achilles is like, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." And they're like, "Yeah, I can't wait to get married." And he's like, "What are you talking about? I don't know anything about this." And they kind of figure out something's afoot, and Achilles said he will protect her, but of course he can't and doesn't. And he, or not can't or doesn't, I should say. And so Agamemnon's eldest daughter is taken up to the altar, and she thinks she is going to get married right up until the last moment when the axe comes down. Now, the way that that story is usually told is actually sort of where, in some cases, literally, that ceremony is off stage. Like, we're with the mom. And so we don't see it happen. So then people come back and she's like, how'd it go? Like, drunk, and just grieving. And they tell her, oh, she didn't die. Artemis turned her into a deer and she ran away and became a priestess in a far off land. But my interpretation of that, and I think it would have been a possible it's up for interpretation, I think, intentionally in that story, is that maybe that's just what they told her, and maybe they actually killed her, and they just told the mom, oh, Artemis turned her into a deer and she ran away. And Agamemnon actually killed his daughter. Wow! What a bastard. Anyway, so there's also some really interesting stuff here. One of my I like we've talked about the role of women a lot in the ancient world, I think, and one of the things that's interesting is just the relationships between men and women that we see in this book. For instance, Achilles says, do you have to be descended from Atreus to love your mate? Every decent, sane man loves his woman and cares for her, as I did, loved her from my heart. And we know from book 1 that Briseis, who he's talking about, when Agamemnon had her taken away, she went unwillingly. Today we'd probably call that Stockholm Syndrome, but I don't know. We don't know exactly how that went. We don't have the rest of the epic cycle, unfortunately, which probably went in more depth. But then we also have, women being traded as prizes and objects, and he says, it doesn't matter that I won her with my spear. Like, he still loved her. Interesting. Now, and also, Achilles, here's the interesting part of this book for me, is when Achilles says, my mother Thetis, a moving silver grace, tells me 2 fates sweep me onto my death. If I stay here and fight, I will never return home, but my glory will be undying forever. If I return home to my dear fatherland, my glory is lost, but my life will be long, and death that ends all will not catch me soon. And he says, now I do not want to fight him anymore. He's talking about Hector. I think Achilles, it's not really about Briseis. I mean, it is, and he is angry about it. He really is, but he's contemplating, he has sort of an existential monologue here where he's talking about a man's life cannot be won back. There are always tripods and cauldrons that can be had. I think he's starting to realize, like, he's troubled. He's like, I could live forever in glory, or in which case I will never return, and I'd have a shorter life, or I can have a normal life. I can get married. He's like, I always wanted to get married here. Back home. He's like, I always wanted to get married there and take a wife and share the joys of life with her. It's like, wow, okay, man, yeah. I think that's part, that is, I don't just think, that is definitely part of his big conflict within his character, is like, I think he just kind of wants to leave at this point. He's like, it's been 9 years. It took me 9 years to figure out. He was basically a kid when he showed up. He was like a teenager, like maybe 18. And then also, oh my goodness, Phoenix, what an interesting character. We get his life story where his mom is telling him, like, hey, sleep with your dad's concubine because I'm jealous and stuff. And he does. Like, that's just some Jerry Springer stuff right there. But then he can't have children. He can't have children. And we get this really sweet scene that he describes of, you wouldn't eat, whether it was at a feast or a meal in the house, unless I set you on my lap and cut your food up and fed it to you and held wine to your lips. That's adorable. We get a little scene of Achilles as a little boy, and we hear how, like, Achilles is, like, strong in counsel, and this guy's like, yeah, you learned that from me. When you showed up here, you didn't know any of this stuff. You didn't know the politics, and I taught you that. And it's like, that's pretty cool. Like, that's just so interesting. It's like, yeah, there would be that person in Achilles' life. He would have someone like that. Even a, quote, hero has the people who, their teachers and stuff. They have their Yoda, their Obi-Wan. I think one of the cool lines also is where Phoenix says, "We all know stories about heroes of old." And he talks about an old story. I tried to make it clear. It's really complicated because it's talking about like 50 different people. But Phoenix tells this story and says, like, look, you can either help us now and get glory for it, or help us later and get no glory for it, or leave. Basically, he tells a story about that. But just the idea that this is a frighteningly old story. And then Phoenix is telling a very old story. It's like, what does that mean, man? How old is that? It's like, I have a friend, Leon, who is a medicine man. He won't tell you unless you ask him, which is one way, by the way, that you can tell if someone's a medicine man. They don't go around saying, hey, I'm a medicine man. But he has all these, he's a Seneca Indian, and he has all these things that are crazy. Like, he has a pair of moccasins that are made with brain-tanned elk leather, and there's blue fabric on the top of on these moccasins. They almost look like blue jeans, and he says, "You know what that is, don't you?" And I said, "What?" He's like, "That's the inside of a cavalry uniform." I was like, "Oh." He's like, "Yeah, these are about 150 years old." And I'm like, "Why are you even walking in these?" But he's careful with them. And I said, like, where'd you pick them up? He's like, "They were given to me." I'm like, "Of course." And he has all these crazy artifacts and stuff. He has eagle feathers on his Gagosa that are like, not Gagosa, sorry, that's a different thing. On his headdress they're like 200 years old. Just the eagle feathers. You have to oil them apparently to keep them, in good condition. And then, but one time he showed me this is all circling back to relevance here, because one time he showed me a little whistle that was made from the bone of an eagle, like an eagle's leg bone or something. He said, "You see that?" It's like, "Yeah." He said, "That is really old." And he's like, "Is this from Black Elk's family?" I've actually met Black Elk's family, which is pretty cool, or descendants of them, yeah. But yeah, when the guy who has moccasins made out of cavalry uniforms from back when the cavalry and the Indians were fighting shows you something and says, "This is really old," So same thing with this guy's story, I think. But yeah, we see religion is everywhere. People are everything they drink and eat, they're like constantly saying grace, we might call it, or like pouring libations and all that. They're constantly asking the gods for approval and being like, "Zeus, please help Achilles, calm down." So that's interesting. Diomedes, this guy's really tearing it up. He's starting to give orders. He's like, "Agamemnon, shut up, quit being so foolish. We're not cowards. You might be, but I'm staying here. And even if everybody else leaves, me and my best friend, we're going to take Ilion's walls by ourselves. So get lost if you want, losers." Diomedes, you're such a bamf. What a cool guy. Anyway, that's pretty much it for my analysis, I think, and commentary. I'm going to go into the chat now. Yay, my favorite part pretty much of the whole thing. So, let's see. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning with the audio, so sorry about that. I'll try to skip those comments. Alright. Can you turn up the sound? Okay, sound stuff. Alright, so how far is it from the walls of Troy to the Greek encampment? I'm not sure. So Bubba the musician asks, how far was it from the walls of Troy to the Greek encampment? I'm not sure. I've tried looking that up. I'm actually trying to figure that out because we have the archaeological site for Troy, and we can see how far away that is from beaches around. However, the water level since that time has probably changed. In fact, it has, at least in some parts of the world. I don't know how all the, different tides work, but when I was at Thermopylae in Greece, I should put a picture up of that sometime, where the 300 Spartans had their stand with the 700 Thespians. The water level of the pass of Thermopylae had receded, like, probably, I don't know, like 30 feet down, which meant like it was about, a mile that way. So I need to look that up. My guess is that they're like barely within sight of each other. The way that at least I'm imagining it is that, you're like half a mile away or a mile away from each other. So enough that you have time to get ready when you see them, but not like right outside. It's not like a medieval siege where you have the castle and then right outside, like everybody's just camped around it. So it's not like that. But I'm actually not sure. I've been trying to look that up. I am hoping to put a map up for you guys at some point to show you just some of the geography of where we are and why this city of Troy was such a strategic spot. It was basically the guard to the pass that let you into the Black Sea, which was where all kinds of trade was at that time as well. So, long way of saying I'm not sure, and that's why, but I'm checking it out. Let's see. From the walls of Troy. Were the Greeks... Stacy says, were the Greeks supplied by other ships going back and forth between Greece and Troy? Food, sword... why do I say swords when I'm reading it? Swords, more soldiers aging into the ranks. Did they manage supplies... how did they manage supplies for 9 years? Yes, so actually they mentioned this in this book, and the book before, where some ships show up with lots of wine, and Nestor says to Agamemnon at the beginning of this book, like, every day you have ships coming in resupplying us. Yeah, you have to resupply a lot because it's an army and those guys eat a lot. So they've raided the nearby towns to try and get more food and stuff. Like, who knows, maybe they had a bad storm one time and the ships couldn't get through and they had to fend for themselves a bit. But yeah, they have ships coming in every day to resupply them. I don't know. I mean, I imagine they would have more soldiers come in at some point. But the math that I did, I'm still doing that ships episode, and one of the things I'm going to talk about in that is we can actually kind of estimate the Greek numbers in this battle, which, if we count the ships and how many people would probably on average fit on each vessel, yada yada, do all that, you get over 140,000 Greeks. That's just with the fleet of ships that's there. So it's possible that they could have new people show up later, but I don't remember anyway. I don't think we hear of anyone new showing up on the Greek side. We do hear about that kind of thing happening with the Trojans, though, because there's a lot of land to the east of Troy. So they do that. Good question. All right, so... Okay, so Bubba the Musician says, the stream was skipping at points. Did you mention Persephone at one point? If so, what was her significance to the story? So Persephone is mentioned in relation to Hades, because the two of them are married. And there's a whole story about Hades and Persephone, which I'll tell you all about some other time. The reason why I'll tell you some other time is because there's something else I want to tell you about the big man downstairs, as they say. Now, in this, absolutely massive cast of characters with so many gods, goddesses, and heroes, and old people, and children, and women, and men, and everybody in between, there's something really fantastically interesting to me, which is there's someone missing. Someone who is not in this book. And it's really kind of interesting that they're not in this book, although they're mentioned a few times, and they were mentioned in this, which, of course, is Hades. Hades is not in this book. Now, why is that? When you've got a book that's full of death and killing, people dying and being sent down to Hades, why isn't Hades a character? Well, Hades is the brother of Zeus and Poseidon, and Hera as well. He is the god of the underworld, but he is not the god of death in Greek mythology. That's someone else. So, um, there's something interesting. Here's a few interesting things about Hades. Everybody thought he must be extremely wealthy because you would dig down into his realm in order to get, like, gold, silver, bronze. Well, you make bronze, but you know what I mean. So they thought he was extremely wealthy. The food that grows up, they thought was being, like, kind of pushed up from his realm. So they thought Hades was very wealthy. People tried to not talk about Hades very much in ancient Greece because it was almost considered bad luck. You didn't want to catch his eye. There's a little story mentioned here where one of the characters in Phoenix's story beats on the ground to try and get attention from Hades. Well, that's something that the Greeks would do. They would beat on the ground because he's down there when they were going to do a ceremony. There were very few cults that were focused on Hades, but whenever they did do sacrifices, they were typically with dark pelted animals like black sheep, for instance. Now, one thing that we learned from this book is that black has always been cool. So, you got Hector's black shield and Achilles' black ships, and all that stuff. But I wonder now if the association of the color black with Hades and his absence in this story and Achilles' stuff being painted black has any significance, because I think it's possible there's sort of a finality to the death in this book. The way that this book approaches death is like it's just done. Like they believe in the underworld, but there's like no coming back from that. And I think the absence of Hades as a character almost makes it, I don't know if nihilistic is the right word or not, but is something about that. Hades is an interesting character in Greek mythology, and he's not in this book, although they mention him a few times. And they say Hades is the one that mortals hate the most of all. He's the only one whose will you can't bend. And I believe what that means, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I believe what that means is that you are going to see Hades someday, and there is nothing you can do about it. You cannot bend the will of Hades. Like, you are definitely gonna go there someday. And Achilles talks about that. He says, whether you're a winner or a loser, you're gonna die. And he says it doesn't really matter anyway. Crazy what people are talking about in this book. But yeah, Hades is not a character with any scenes in Iliad. Very strange. Let's continue on. Let's see. All right, Goram Darth Cal, but then you have to ask everyone, is there a medicine? If they're a medicine man, yeah. So I mentioned Leon earlier. All right, so Goram Darth Cal said, your friend is obviously a time traveler. Well, perhaps. Bubba says, really old for the eagle whistle I mentioned before. Goram Darth Cal says, who would you cast if you were making an Iliad film? Oh, boy. Great question. So many of you watching this know, and some of you might not know, that I make movies. And so obviously this has crossed my mind. I think that, I'm going to talk about, I haven't mentioned it yet, I think, in any episodes so far. I'm going to do a review of the movie Troy by Wolfgang Petersen, starring Brad Pitt and, of course, Peter O'Toole as King Priam, who steals the show in my opinion, and it's got a fantastic cast. Who would I cast? Geez. I've been thinking about that more and more lately. And I'm honestly not so sure who I would cast. I do think I know how I would make it, though, as far as the presentation. I would do one of two very different things, but I don't think if I made Iliad that I would be very historically accurate to the type of armor people were wearing at the time. Partially because there is so little we know about what everything looked like at that time. Like, we have some very rough pottery design, like pictures, and we have a couple pieces of armor, from archaeological finds, and of course bronze lasts forever, so we have tons of bronze laying around everywhere. But I think if I were to do an Iliad film, I don't know if I would do, well, first off, I don't know if I would make Iliad into a movie. Part of me really wants to do that. I'm not sure if I would make just the Trojan War as a story, because that's one of the big misconceptions people get, is that the movie Troy is not based on Iliad. It takes a lot of stuff from Iliad, but obviously the movie begins before this book does. This book begins 9 years into the war, and that movie begins before the war even starts. So I think I might be inclined to do a full, Battle of Troy movie, which would be fun. But I think I would also go with more classical Greek looking art design. I think I would have things be not, I don't think I'd make it a very literal film. I would have all the gods and goddesses in there. I would have the Corinthian helmets with the horse plumes and stuff that everybody recognizes, because part of the idea for this book for the Greeks was, when they were listening to this story, they were casting their mind back on a glorious time in their mindset. For us, we would be kind of casting our minds back on a, quote, glorious time for our mindset, and we would, while also relating to that in very gritty, real ways. And for me, I think a lot of people, when they think about Greeks, they have a very classical Greece looking sort of image bank for it. So I think I would want to do that. I think Brad Pitt actually doesn't do a terrible job. I think Brad Pitt does a better job than his wig in the movie Troy. But I think it really is a fantastic cast they have, and Peter O'Toole is the best thing in it. But I don't know. I have to keep thinking about exactly who I want to have in my Iliad movie that I hope to do someday, because I very much would like to do that. I'd either have it look very like all the historians would hate me, and you know what? It's Greek mythology. Get lost, guys. But it would be solid. And the other way I thought about doing it is in a fake war that doesn't exist, some modern war where instead of sort of like the setup I had with all the tanks and stuff, I'd have it be a war that was not a real thing, where you'd have this is the other way I'd make it. I'd either do classical Greece, or I'd do something slightly more surreal, where it really dug into what the characters were like, and then visually just interpreted it with tanks and a city that looks a bit like Stalingrad just being ripped apart and stuff. So I think that there's so many ways you could do it. But yeah, I'll think more about the cast. I think that when I do my review of Troy at some point, I'll bring in and here's how I would do it. But or as I come up with more stuff, I'll tell you. But I'm not sure. Ask me again sometime who I'd cast. It'd be hard to beat Peter O'Toole. But with that, I think that's about it for episode 9. I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope that if you have joined me live, well, first off, if you have joined me live for this, thank you very much. If you have come around after the fact, thank you so much for catching up with us. We're very glad to have you here, and I hope to have you around either live or afterward for episode 10, which will be this Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So with that, I think we are just about done. So I'm looking forward to this. I really like this one. Also, hey, drop in the comments of this. I asked before, how has your opinion of Achilles changed in this runtime? At the beginning, he's maybe really pouty, but now it's hey, this... For me, my perception of Achilles at this point in the story changes, because he's thinking more about why am I even fighting this war? I should go get married and become unimportant in a way. And I think there's something to that. It's almost like he's got something else going on than just the pride and anger, although that's what he has to put out there, and it is real. He does feel that way, but yeah, I don't know. There seems to be more to this Achilles fellow than just that he's angry. You know, I think. Have a good night.